welcome to the official podcast of the Indiana High School Baseball Coaches Association. IHSBCA leadership includes Executive Director Brian Abbott, President Jeremy Ritchie, and First VP Kevin Hannon. Follow them online at IHSBCA.org and be sure to give them a follow on Twitter with the handle at IHSBCA. I'm your host, Dan Hill of Baseball Across Indiana, and with that, let's get right to today's episode. Our guest, Gene Mattingly, who will be entering his fifth year, right, Coach, at Southridge, as the head coach anyway.
6 year. If we got to add COVID in
That's
there.
Right. 11 years, I think, assistant before that down there at Southridge. Right. And we got a good one today. We're not going to talk about the details of it too quick, but matter of fact, even talking offline here, I said, Coach, I'm going to have to hit record here eventually because we could just keep talking for a couple hours and not even get an official interview done. Because the topic of today's episode, which I'll get at here in a little bit, is one that I've wanted to talk to you about for a long time, and we're also going to talk about why I waited to talk to you about it. Right. But before we get into all that, one thing I want to start is why baseball? You're a businessman. Tell me about your baseball background. What part of this game still makes you feel like a 12-year-old kid?
Every part of it. Baseball for me. I grew up in southern Mississippi, and good weather. Grew up right on the Gulf of Mexico, and we played baseball all year round. That was across the street from my house was a cow pasture, and my friends would ride the school bus home with me, and we'd do our homework. And as soon as Mom was satisfied that the homework was done, we shot across the road, jumped the fence, and we played baseball till dark. I mean, that's just what we did. And so for me, I started at probably 4, played, every chance I could every year going through, and was lucky enough to have a fairly decent high school career, and ended up getting picked up by a little small private NAIA school in Mobile, and had some success. I wasn't a great player. I had some skills, and then there were some holes in some of my abilities, but I played for really good coaches, not just ball coaches, but really good men. And I think that probably shaped a lot of who I am, and probably a lot of who I am as a coach. And so,
how big was the high school down there in
it was small when I went. It was probably about the size of Southridge, actually. So we were a small 2A school then. Now I think it's one of the larger high schools in the state now, because Katrina came in and everybody had to move off the coast, and I was inland just a little bit, so that kind of area just kind of blew up. It's a county school.
Baseball's changed quite a bit, but you're a southern guy. What's the maybe then versus now? I think with all the technology and everything, I think the everything's kind of balancing out a little bit as far as opportunity, other than the seasons. But growing up, seeing what you see now, what's the baseball scene like in Mississippi, which really is, in my opinion, one of the baseball capitals of the world?
It is, and I think it's you're right. So technology and some of the travel organizations and some of the national type tournaments for the summer has kind of leveled the playing field a little bit as far as the player development and kind of the player scene. Obviously, weather, climate still has a lot to do with it. But man, if you look at what we've done just in Indiana with the indoor facilities and what's going on in so many different locations for guys to get, year-round training if they want it.
Identification too, they can get recognized, with the scene a lot better now for sure too. And we're going to talk about some of those guys that got recognized on those teams of yours. You're down there, you talk about baseball talent, you're down there in the Pocket Conference, which it's a big conference, 12 schools, and one of my favorite conferences. I mean, you guys got some talent down there with, you guys, and, South Spencer with 4 state titles, North Posey with a couple, Tecumseh with 1. They were the runner-up last year. And, we don't even mention Forest Park, who won the conference last year.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Which, ironically, Forest Park's probably the most talented team again this year. I mean,
Yeah.
Howard does a great job. It's a tough conference. There's a few years, I forget how many when I was an assistant, how many times the conference winner went on to either the state or the semi-state, that really had a real good success going through the state tournament. But yeah, you talk about Coach Keister down at South Spencer and heck of a job. And then you expand that geographically into what goes on down in Evansville, and then here in my backyard, right, is the legend himself, Coach Gobert, right? That just turns out. I think I read the other day he's got Jasper has 40 sectionals, 15 semi-states, and
Yeah.
6 or 7 state titles. Yeah, I mean the juggernaut that is Jasper baseball. So yeah, Southern Indiana is chock full of good quality baseball.
Absolutely, it is. As a matter of fact, in your conference, you just going off of what you mentioned there, real quick. Tecumseh finishes 7-5 in your conference in 22, I think it was, and then they were
Hmm.
runner up in at the state at 1A,
Yeah,
I think, aren't they?
one
Tecumseh's
A,
one.
yeah,
That's what I thought.
one
So
A,
yeah, and
yeah.
plus you guys play in League Stadium. I mean, come on, how nice is that?
Yeah, that's pretty nice. I think sometimes our guys, they're a little spoiled, to be honest. I mean, the city, we lease that from the city, right? So, and it's well kept, it's well manicured, it's a great place to play. So, yeah, we try to make sure they don't take that for granted. So we'll take them out on the parking lot and make them take ground balls out there every now and then. So
Nice.
just to keep them humble.
And that's a topic that's funny. That's some foreshadowing right there. We're going to talk about that a little bit because you had what I called some dudes on your team there. That one of the things that always interests me about baseball is the psychology of baseball. That balance between humility and confidence and things like that. We're going to dive into that a
Mhm.
little bit, and we talked I mentioned at the beginning here that I've been wanting to talk to you about this for a long time, and let's set the stage here a little bit. I'm going to run through some things. You can put me on mute if you don't want to relive some of this too deep for a little bit. I'm going to kind of set the stage for a phase from 2018 to 2021, and then I'll talk about what kind of our general theme is for the conversation going forward. Let's go back to 2018. It's your first year as the head coach at Southridge, and
Right.
great year. Your first year, you make it all the way to the finals, and you're going up against Boone Grove, which Patrick Antone was their first year coach there
Mm.
too, and
First year, yep.
he's now at Roncalli, and you had to face Ty Bothwell. Wow! In your first state finals, he had 5 no hitters, 2 perfect games. You had about 160 punch outs and only 70 innings pitched. So your first state finals, you're going up against a juggernaut, and he lived up to it about the first 5 innings there. And then I think it was the 6th or the 7th, you really came alive. End result, I'll kind of go through this quick, and then we're going to pick it apart. But the end result of that 2018 was a heartbreak. It could have been maybe the best come from behind 7th inning state finals win in history, or at least as far as I know. But it was a heartbreaking 5-4 loss with bases juiced in the 7th, and so hard loss there. But you know you've got a strong core of underclassmen, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. So going into 2019, and really, wow, what can I say about this 2019? You make it to the finals again. You're going up against Alexandria Monroe. Jeff Klosser,
Mhm.
great coach there for Alexandria Monroe, and Moorhead, another great pitcher. And
Great.
I want to
Yeah.
talk about him a little bit too, because he's kind of under the radar, but he kept you guys in check, and that was hard to do for the team that you guys had that year.
Yeah,
Um,
he was great.
Yep, a lot of control. He was the of the 3 pitchers in these 3 state finals we're going to talk about. He was kind of the Maddox, if you will, the
Mhm.
control guy. But anyway, the end result of that is, I'll try to give a summary of this so we can get into talking about it. But uh, the end result is, to me, it was maybe the most dramatic ending to a baseball game at any level I have ever seen, and that's not sugarcoating anything. Um, you were up. Bell was in control really the whole game.
Oh, yeah.
Ethan Bell was, and gave up. some hits, or I'd have to look at the exact. We'll go into it more in detail, but he gave up.
He scattered
Yep,
5 hits, 6 hits around.
yep.
Yeah.
He didn't really, really, they weren't much until the sixth inning where he gave up a single and a couple gappers.
Mhm.
But even after that, you're still up 3-2. You go into the seventh, and this is where a book could be written on one inning. And Bell goes, you're up 3-2, and Bell gets stronger. He strikes out the number. I don't have it in front of me. He goes strike out. Then the third batter comes up, and it's strike one. I think then ball. Then strike two, strike three. Southridge's crowd goes nuts. You find out the ball's dropped. Alexandria guy sprints to first base. Alexandria is still on their feet cheering. Ball goes over the first baseman's head. Shortridge sits down. Alexandria Monroe stands up, and then less than 5 minutes later, the game's over, and Alexandria Monroe takes home the title. That's kind of the short version of it. So your core, your strong, you still, I don't want to say the core, but it is the core. You had some good upperclassmen too, but you still had a strong core of four sophomores, a couple juniors, or maybe seniors. I think Shank was a junior or a
He
senior
was
that
a,
year.
he was a senior. He
He was
was
a senior
19.
that year. I couldn't remember if he was a
Yeah.
junior and just didn't play because it was 2020 after that. But so you want redemption. You still got a young core, but now you got to set out 2020.
Which was our
2020,
best team.
yeah. The 2021 comes around. Now you're 3A. You're in the
Right.
championship game, and you're facing Mathis of Hanover Central. Ryan Bridges was their coach, another first-year coach. But he had I think they were, I only had two. I think they were 29-2 coming in, and Mathis was a whole different animal. Like, you're probably, this is one of the questions I might want to ask you is, did you ever think you were going to get somebody past first base because he had a pickoff move that was unreal? But
Yeah, we should have got the first guy on because I think he balked every time he threw to first, but that's a whole nother story.
yeah,
But
well,
no,
I did see, matter of fact, I rewound, you talking about that. I rewound that, the one balk they called on him. I think I rewound that like three or four times because it definitely, absolutely was a balk. I mean, he was leaning on
yeah,
a few of those.
yeah.
And there were a few moments like that where even in 18 and 19, the game could have went the other way.
Oh,
Um,
100%.
but
But
let's,
no, that 21 great competitors, both sides. I mean, Hanover Central was, I mean, they had some dudes on that team too. I think the one kid ended up at Illinois.
yep,
So they played, I mean, they were good.
yep.
And you're right. Were we going to get somebody off of first base without getting picked off? I don't know. It was tough.
Well, and Mathis, I kept calling him Mathis, but it's Mathis was a lefty, and you've got four or five lefties at the front end of your lineup there. So I mean, it was a good challenge, of course. For 3 straight years, I think Montgomery was intentionally walked four times. I think it was over those three state
Yeah.
finals. But anyway, I think Hanover Central, any other year, they win that state finals, but you guys it was fate. You were not going to be denied that year, and your team. I'm not taking anything away from the talent of your team as well, but I mean, you were not going to be
Right.
denied that year.
No, there was a sense from that team and that group of seniors that was the only way they could go out. I mean, it was the only way they could go out was to win. And somebody asked me about it afterwards, and I said, I was so calm through that game, which was amazing because the other ones, the other ones were kind of nerve wracking, but this one, you just had a sense of that whatever was required of them, they were going to do. We could have played 15 innings or we could have played 20 innings. It wouldn't have mattered. Whatever was required, that group was going to get done. And so, yeah, how much fun was it to watch those guys go out with a blue ribbon instead of a red ribbon? I mean,
That was
basically that's what both.
it was. I come at all this, as you know, from a fan perspective, and I am impartial. I like Coach Bridges, and he put together a great team that
Mhm.
year. But man, you're right. It was, from a fan perspective, it was a script. It was a story that just had a fantastic ending, and that's what I want to kind of pick apart a little bit, because with that general theme of loss, and not just baseball, but dealing with loss in your personal life and in baseball, putting it all in perspective, and how do you, get the kids to embrace that concept? But let's talk about the players for just a little bit because you mentioned, we talked about Bell. And when I think of Ethan Bell, as a matter of fact, I told his dad this, I think a couple times is just composure. I don't know how a guy that probably weighs 90 pounds soaking wet can stay that composed, but still have that fierce lion mentality inside him. It's an art.
Yeah, I mean, and that was one of the things that was really unique about Bell is there was nothing about him that was imposing. He was a rail, 6 foot tall, maybe 6'1", 140 pounds soaking wet, but
But he
you
also
can't
almost hit
measure
90 on the
hard.
gun too. So I mean, he
Yeah, I
was
mean,
he
you
was
couldn't measure his heart. I mean, he was a competitor. When he stepped on the mound, he thought he was Nolan Ryan or Roger Clemens. I mean, of course, he wouldn't even know who those guys are. He's too young, but you know what I'm saying? He just had that kind of fierce competitive nature when the ball was in his hand. And heck, he pitched as a freshman. He was the first guy out of the pen in 2018 as a freshman. So he had been exposed to that atmosphere and relished it. And then of course he got the ball. He got the ball to start 19, and then he got the ball again in
21.
21.
And thinking of that, thinking about because I know you put him in. He had a surgery or some he had an injury and he didn't get many innings. Was there I know in hindsight now, I guarantee you, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure you don't have any second thoughts on putting him in there that in 18. But were there any thoughts in after 2018 that you might have second guessed on that?
Oh no, there was never, there was a doubt, we in 18, so our pitching coach was Joe Keish, he was a professional ball player with the Rangers organization. He did an amazing job as a head coach. I was an assistant under him. He did an amazing job as our pitching coach. Probably the best baseball mind I've probably ever been around when it comes to in-game just decision and calmness. And he was our pitching coach. So he felt something there. So he sent two guys to the pen and he said, I'll let you know when I get back to the dugout and I trusted him and he did. He said, it's Bell. And I had no reservations about sending him out there. But to your point, he hadn't been on the mound a lot because I guess if I had something I would regret, I made that freshman class all of those studs. I said, there's no way you're going to start. You're not starting on the varsity until you play JV. Now that may have been the worst coaching decision I ever made. So I make all those guys go play in a JV tournament before this. It was a Saturday before we started, and Bell lays down the perfect sack bunt, batting in the 2-hole in the top of the first, hits the bag wrong at first base, blows up his ankle. So he gets one at bat in a JV game that the JV coach had him sack bunt. And so he's done. We don't get him back till about 2 weeks before the season's over.
So I
And he
thought it was like
maybe
eight
had,
innings, maybe or six
he
or
had
eight.
8 innings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
But,
looking at him, he was composed as a freshman, though. That I mean, his composure as a
but
freshman when those in that what was it, 1 1/3 maybe he pitched or was it?
yeah, I mean, he didn't have his best stuff that day. But that was a really, he came in a tough spot,
Yeah,
and then we made some boo-boos behind him. We ran a play that I think based on crowd noise or whatever, somebody didn't get a call and we ended up giving up a run on a stolen base, on a planned pickoff. So anyway, so that kind of flustered him a little bit, but no, he was ready for the situation physically and mentally. He was ready for it. And so, his inability or what you would call lack of success as a freshman had nothing to do with him being a freshman.
Right.
It had a
That's
lot
right.
to do with Dean Grove.
Well, before we get into the rest of that freshman class there, I mean, you started Logan Sager and man, he looked really good too.
Yeah, he
Tell me about that
was
senior class. Some of those guys, the senior class. Tell me about maybe the leadership role they had with these four, young studs coming up.
yeah. I don't think people give. I don't think people from the outside, maybe outside of the program or even outside of sports, as coaching, understand the value of the guys that are leading the team, whether they're playing or not. And so, you take that first group of seniors and, Jace Harder, which is a name nobody's probably going to remember as a baseball guy. He was the shortstop the year before in 17, the starting quarterback when they won the state title in football in the winter or in the fall, right? Played basketball. Our first conversation about baseball, Jace Harder said, "Coach, I'm fine playing anywhere you need me because I don't know that I'm better than Colson Montgomery." And he came to me about it before, I think during basketball season, and said, "Hey, wherever you need me, I'll play." But that was the kind of mentality that senior class had. They were about the team. They were about winning, and they really relished the role of being a mentor of those guys. They wanted to set a tone. And this is how we're going to do. Yeah, and they did. They were great at it.
You had Sager and Harder and Colin Smith? Was he a senior? Or?
Well, Sager was actually a junior.
Junior, okay. And then
Sager was a 19 grad.
Okay.
So you had Colin Smith, Jace Harder, Justin Lammers, Max Summersheim.
And was Schnack
Brown?
Was Tucker a senior that year?
Tucker was a junior.
Junior. That's
right. He was a junior. He was a 19.
They said, speaking of, you were talking about Harder throwing as a quarterback, and Schnack was the one that caught the passes that won the state finals. Said he was the best athlete on the team. That's saying a lot on that.
Yeah, he was a born leader. I don't know what he'll do in life professionally, but whatever he does, he's going to be great at it, and everybody's going to follow him. Yeah.
Well,
he had that ability,
and I think you had a few of them on that team. Looking at you, we mentioned you were state finals runner-up in 18 and 19, but you also had the mental attitude winner in 18 and 19, and these guys just seem like two great guys. I'm talking about Lammers and LaGrange, and we could talk about, I think it was LaGrange or was it Lammers in 18? Yeah, it was
Lammers in 18 pinch hit.
Yes,
Lammers
in 18 that started everything.
The senior roped a single. And got kind of a little bit of momentum. I think that's when Bothwell had to come out because he reached his pitch count limit. And then we kind of strung some things together, gave us a chance to win. And we just didn't get a hit when we needed it. A lot of pressure. Joe LaGrange was actually 2019's mental attitude award winner, was the one who flew out to short left in 18.
Yep.
So.
And how hard was it for those guys? I've always said this: you get the mental attitude award, and they throw a mic in your face in front of a packed crowd. How hard was that? Yeah. But they nailed it.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be one of the hardest things to do. Is like these kids are not prepared. I mean, I talk for a living basically, right? And don't stop. These guys rarely are in front of a microphone in front of a crowd like that, and for them to show poise and be able to articulate some clear thoughts in a kind of a chaotic moment, I was very proud of them. Yeah. A testament to their parents and how they were brought up in our school system, be able to to kind of prepare them for something like that.
Well, and let's finish off the rest of the Fantastic Four. We talked about Ethan Bell. Let's go to he pitched a few innings there in 2018. He was followed up by Camden Gasser, and first thing I got to ask is Michigan. Could we have not have done anything to keep him from going to Michigan? But
hey, you know what? I tried. I'll be honest. I didn't push real hard, but I did kind of say, hey, you know what? There's a team up the road, either or the team down the road, but because talking about Gasser, I mean, you're talking about a kid who might be, Tucker Shank might have been the best competitor I ever coached. From a toughness. Just a mental toughness. Camden Gasser may be the best competitor that just got the most out of what he has, and he'll continue to get out of it. I mean, here's a guy who's 5'7", as a freshman, weighs 110 pounds, and would go to war against anybody. It didn't matter when he stepped between the lines. he was the baddest dude on the field. Now, he'd drive you crazy sometimes with his antics, but man, I would, tell you a quick story. His freshman year, we're in the regional championship game we're at Austin. We're getting ready to play North Posey, who's got Shane Harris on the mound because they didn't have to pitch him the first game. We had already pitched Sager because at that point we'd never won a game in regional. So we pitched Sager, we felt like we had to win game one. You can't get to the championship game, right? So we're sitting there. We had another junior that we were super confident in. It was a left-hander. It just didn't feel. I don't think he felt good or whatever, And so we're like, oh crap, we got to find somebody. I said, So pitching coach is like, well, I don't know this, that, and I'm like, he's like, Camden freshman, big spot. And I'm like, tell you what, don't give the ball to any of them. Just let me. I'm gonna kind of feel this. I'm gonna kind of get the pulse. I said, who wants the ball? And Camden jumped up with it, raised his hand and said, give me the ball, coach. And I'm like, all right, here it is. I flipped it to him. He gives up a run in the top of the first. And I think we went on to run roll him because I think we ended up with, I think we knocked Harris out pretty quick. But yeah, I mean, just no fear whatsoever out of that kid. And, he's going to do great at Michigan.
Yeah. Well, I think he's a sophomore this year. He
redshirted last year, so he's a sophomore, redshirt sophomore, yeah. Or
redshirt
freshman.
Well, he started off his freshman year there in 18 and batting ninth, and then in 19 he almost hit 500, and then 550 his senior year. So yeah, he had it going on. The Chase Taylor is another one that impresses me a lot. We talked offline about the throw, but this kid, you said it, and you're preaching to the choir. You guys would not have got where you were if it wasn't for this kid that started as a catcher his freshman year and took you guys all the way through 2021. Another, he committed to University of Evansville like Ethan Bell did as well.
Yeah, he was an early UE commit. Chase came in as a pretty mature physically kid. His tools were great. He was strong, had a great arm. He could hit fastballs like no other. We worked on a few things. He didn't start right away as a freshman, like none of them really did. And then, he just kept working and kept working. And we talked about Lammers as the mental attitude award, where he was the returning catcher. And it was like, okay, coach, I'm probably not the best for this spot. I'll do anything I can to help us win, but
you got to like that as a coach.
Absolutely. You're right. I mean, that's where we were talking about the maturity level of that senior group. Not that they didn't want to play. They wanted to win. And they knew that for us to get where we were capable of getting, that, they needed these young kids to play. But Chase Taylor, tremendous as a freshman in game, tremendous as a sophomore in game. I forget what he hit. Like in the freshman, he hit the double into the gap that where Colson was on, because they intentionally walked Colson, and then to get to him, and then he has a 2 RBI double to follow it. He had several hits in the game against Alexandria. I believe he had a couple, and then again in 21 where he had some big hits too. And he can completely control a running game.
Well, and one thing we were talking about with Chase Taylor that I noticed is, I mean, he was a stout kid in 2018 as a freshman, but that senior year, I mean, he bulked up. He was a man, and he had a cannon throw. I saw him throw a couple back doors down to first base to try to pick offs, and he had I think it was 2 drop third strikes that were just absolute cannons down the first base. Tell me about his maturation, going from his freshman year to senior year, and maybe, how did he handle that, 2018?
Coming in as a freshman, he was just physical. I mean, he was just a physically imposing dude. Most kids aren't that physically fit as freshmen. And he just continued. He worked. Of course, he played football. He wrestled. He was in the weight room. He continued to play summer baseball. I mean, he was competing pretty much every day.
Well, that's one thing. Along those lines of I think it was 19 starters, 16 of them were 3-sport athletes there in 18 too. So that sounds like something you guys are all in for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about it this way. We're a 2A school. Well, now we're 3A by, I don't know, 2 students or 3 students or whatever. But so we're 2A school, but that, for us to be competitive in multiple sports, our athletes have to play multiple sports. And so we really, our starts with all of our head coaches and our athletic department. We promote multiple sport athletes because we want to be successful across the board. We don't want to just be a good football, school, or a good baseball school, or a good basketball school, or cross country, or whatever. We want to provide quality programs across the board, and we need our athletes playing multiple sports in order to do that. So all of our guys, I think 18, we had one guy that was a single sport guy. I think in 19 we had, I'm not sure we had any single sport guys in 19.
Well, in 21, even Montgomery, I mean, I think he backed off of football, but he was still playing basketball and baseball.
Yeah, yeah. So
And
yeah, I mean, we didn't have. It was rare for us to have a single sport athlete on the baseball team. It just is. I mean, we've got a couple now, but it's not common for our school to be single sport. But Chase Taylor, again, we wouldn't have been anywhere near those games if it wouldn't have been for him. We wouldn't have gotten to those games, and we wouldn't have stayed in those games and won those games if it wasn't for him. A lot of people, and we've never specifically talked about the throw. Okay. We've never had a man-to-man conversation about the throw. If he ever wants to have it, be happy to talk to him about it. But I think he knows how I feel about him as a person and as a player. And, and I tell these guys, one moment's never going to define who they are unless they let it.
well, and that's
Okay.
one of the things I want to dig into too is your approach, especially 19, is
Mm.
how you flip the switch from coach to what I call dad mode
Mm.
after that game. I want to dive into that a little bit too here in just a minute, and just talk about that dialogue that you're having with the kids. But let's talk about the other one that everybody's probably heard of there from that crew from 2018 to 2021, Colson Montgomery. He was
Yeah, most
like
people knew him.
I think so. He was I think 22nd overall draft pick in 2021, the second highest ever for anybody from Indiana. And one thing I got to ask, that bow tie there at the selection show, did you have
He
a
did
say in
not
that?
ask for my permission. No, he did not ask my approval.
Hey, that's
Oh,
representing though. I love it. And tell us
yeah.
how special that kid was.
He was special specimen, like athletic specimen across the board. Superhuman being. He's a good guy. He's a good kid. He was good to coach, but he was kind of hard to coach because he was so. How do I put it? He was so focused on getting better. It was crazy. So there was times where he was almost would just kind of withdraw because he was so focused on what he needed to get done. So a lot of times we'd have to bring him into the fold as into the group. He's a great leader, but sometimes he expected so much out of himself. He would kind of pull away, go get his own work in, and then he would kind of mold back in. So great kid. I mean, think about it. Could have played Division I sport in 3 different sports, right? Football,
IU
he
was
was
talking to him at
quarterback.
18. I think it was for
Yeah,
basketball.
basketball. He was one of the first guys. He was one of the first freshmen or sophomores or whatever to go to Louisville for a game, a visit with the basketball team. Before he was getting recruited as a baseball player, he was getting recruited by them as a basketball guy. So just unbelievable athlete, right? You hear it all the time. It's cliche. Great athlete, better person. And he's as good a person as you'll see.
We talked about a little bit, or we mentioned it a little bit at the beginning on how the environment of baseball's changed. It's easier for players to get recognized these days.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any, I think few coaches have the experience of coaching a prospect to the level of Colson Montgomery, just to be fair. Are there any special challenges, from a coaching perspective? Another way I put it, what would you tell Coach Fireman of Franklin Community right now with Max
Oh
Clark?
yeah, no doubt. You know what? Yeah, from experience, the best thing we did was Colson and I sat down and kind of said, "Here's how we came up with a game plan of how we were going to approach the scouts." Now, right, all the scouts have a job to do, right? That's their job. We have a job to do and a responsibility as a coach to protect our player to a certain degree, but also to make sure it doesn't become a distraction for the other 25 guys, right? I mean, and so we sat down and talked about what did he need, what was going to help him be his best every day, and I got to commend the Midwest Scouting Association. They have basically what we did was we decided this: they were not to contact him directly with questions on when's practice, where's the game, are you guys blah blah blah, when are you taking BP, all the stuff that was out of his control. We just agreed that they weren't to ask him, right? Anything like that would come from me. So what they have an email group. So every Monday morning I would email at 9:00. I would email out exactly what the game plan was for the week, and there was no questions came out. We never had an issue. If I said we were taking on-field BP at 4:30 on Thursday, they just knew to show up, and there was no like distraction from them walking down and trying to pull him to the side or pulling a coach to the side. It worked really, really well, and I have to thank them, all the scouts that were involved, because they respected it. They didn't overstep.
Well, in that
And
part
it
of the
worked out.
state, I mean, that part of the state knows talent. There's there's been talent coming from out of there. So I mean, they may not have seen anyone to the level of Colson Montgomery in a long time, but there's that little part of the state.
Yeah, and and the thing, like with Max, he's not just getting the Midwest scouts; he's getting the national cross checkers, and he's getting the scouting directors, which is what Colson. I'd get a text that, hey, we're flying in from California. The scouting director's coming in. I'm like, okay, the system doesn't change. You've got the email. This is our program. This is our protocol. Doesn't matter. Nothing changes. And I think after a week or so, they appreciated the fact that they could count on the schedule. Now you can't control rain, right? So, but the schedule and timing, we did a pretty good job of staying on time and on schedule. And so they would just map their travel arrangements around it.
What part,
And it worked pretty good.
maybe during that stretch, what part of, when did you tell yourself, okay, I need to get ahead of this, from a couple angles, to
Before the season
manage people
started.
contacting him as well as that team dynamic too, like you were
Hmm.
talking about.
Yeah, kind of the year going into at the end of the summer of 20, when we didn't have a season in 20, which I think was our best team, by the way, our deepest team. Okay. So, but then they opened up the travel ball kind of opened up a little bit. Some of the showcase stuff kind of opened up a little bit. So we were able to get some of these guys onto teams and get them out there. And he blew up, right? So he just, area code games and perfect game, All-American, all these kinds of things. So coming into, out of that fall, because he didn't play football. So we kind of got kind of a good taste of what it might be like. So we kind of got ahead of that from a standpoint of distraction. But when I knew it needed to be we needed to have a sit down so him and Camden and a couple others played basketball. Well, they went all the way to the regional final, or semi-state, I guess, finals. So they didn't have their practices in before we started playing for our first game. So they didn't have enough practices to participate. So we go to Jeffersonville and he's not there. And he's back home practicing with the JV team. And,
You had bleachers full of media there.
yeah. And they're like, everybody's going crazy. I'm like, nobody reached out. Nobody asked, right? They just assumed.
Right.
And so I knew at that point it was going to be because he got his phone started blowing up. Then the rumor mill starts. He's injured. He got kicked off the team. What's going on? Well, coach is an idiot, but it wasn't because of that, right? So yeah, they weren't eligible to play, and so they stayed home and got practice.
Well,
So
you take Colson Montgomery off that team, which strike me dead for saying that, but you take Colson Montgomery
you
off that
can't
team,
now, so don't worry about it.
you still got some dudes on there that you're still going to have to deal with team dynamics. So I mean, tell me about what are some of the things you were intentional about as far as that team relationship dynamic? Keep it fun, keep it light.
Yeah, exactly. And the good thing is, and I think I do a pretty good job of this, and only because I ask my coaches to hold me accountable, is everybody's treated fairly. Not everybody, we don't have rules, we have expectations, right? So we have a standard at which our team and our players and coaches are supposed to adhere to. And it didn't matter if it was Colson or Chase or Camden or the guy at third string, catcher, you built in guy. Everybody's held to the same standard. And so I think it took a bit for once that was established and they saw it firsthand, we really didn't have any. I mean, granted, now there might be, just like anything, there might be a little bit of envy, there might be a little bit of, but nothing ever materialized to a point where it affected team chemistry or at least the locker room as it pertained to what I could see.
Well, speaking of expectations, let's talk about that. How did you address expectations? Was it a silent word, or how, intentional were you about it on the other side of that coin between 18 and, of course, 18, the team because you've been the assistant coach for 11 years, but, was there a different way of handling expectation between 18, 19, and 21?
No, there was probably a different level of expectation from 17 to 18. Right.
As far as like how you addressed it, anything, it was business as usual.
No, I mean, I think 19 was, I think we played off this mantra of this unfinished business. We got something to prove. We didn't like the taste it left in our mouth. But we didn't approach it any differently. We still kind of, I'm a huge Alabama football fan, right? And so I'm a huge Nick Saban fan. So we're way more process driven than result driven. And so we keep going back to, do the little things right, be really good at the boring stuff. And then the excellent, the extra stuff will take care of itself. And so we really just kind of went back to work. And between 19 and 20, it was the same thing. We're just going to go back to work. And we're going to do what we do. We're going to try and be better than we were last year. And we do that by trying to be better than we were yesterday. And we use a lot of, and you can call them cliches, but mantras of just basically trying to set a tone for our players to live up to. And they've always done a good job of embracing that. Because I think this is just my opinion as a head coach. Looking at, there's nobody I admire more than probably Terry Gover, okay, at Jasper. It doesn't matter what year it is. They're going to win 25 games. They're going to win a sectional, and they're going to compete for a state title. And you can erase all the names, and the talent is up and down sometimes. But those guys are going to play this. They're going to play the right way, the hard way, and they're just going to get it done because they are consistent in how they approach it. And I think from our perspective, we want to be, not that we're going to be Jasper, but we want to have our approach to be consistent and have a process in place that our guys, that our program can be successful, whether we have Colson Montgomery's, Cam McGaster's, Chase Taylor's, and Ethan Bell's every year, or whether we have just other Jimmys and Joes that can be consistent at what they're doing to get better and still compete for sectional.
Well, and I think
that's our goal every year.
I think Jasper's back down to 3A this year, and you guys have one more year, unless you win the state. You've got one more year of 3A, I think, and you don't.
Well, we're going to stay in 3A based on enrollment.
Oh, you're enrollment now, 3A. Okay.
So I give Terry a hard time. So they're twice our size, and I hope we play in first game of sectional. So 1 versus 1, and one of us will get put out, and the other one will go on our merry way and try and win it.
Off topic, sidetrack here real quick, but classifications. Is that a topic that we can give just a simple thought on, or is that a whole nother show?
Well, it might be a whole nother show, but I will tell you this: if the IHSAA is listening, and I may get I may get hate mail for this, I think success factor for public schools is ridiculous.
There's a lot
I'll
of
leave it at that.
I think
I'll
Steve
leave it at
Kaufman had
that.
an article about that, and that was I think that was a pretty common theme right there. So I know you're not alone.
Ironically, we move up a class and we win one.
Yeah.
That besides that, I think success factor for public schools is ridiculous, because
Well, like
now others are
baseball is.
penalized.
You tell me if I'm wrong here, but baseball is. I think more than any other sport, the one piece can change everything. I think back
Unbelievable.
to university a few years ago, they get Reese Sharp in, and they may have won the 4A title.
Yeah.
There, he set the
Well,
record for strikeouts in the finals.
yeah, it's amazing. Geez, you can because it's such a pitcher dominated sport. It's kind of like, I mean, think about softball too.
But even softball, they can pitch every game.
Every game,
Right.
right? So you got one dude or one gal stud in the in the circle for softball or on the bump for baseball. It makes a huge difference. And what happens when that guy leaves?
Right.
And you've gotten bumped up because of,
Right.
and now and I'm not crying. I'm just saying there's some dynamics there that don't fit well in a public school system.
And it's a tough equation. I think
It is.
everybody knows
And
that it's a tough equation. There's some math there
I
that's
wouldn't
above
want to
my
be the
pay
one
grade.
making that decision. Put
Right.
it that way,
Exactly.
right?
Well, I like you said, we could probably spend a whole show on that. But going back to coaches, I think they try to use the let's focus on the drill, let's focus on this to get a player out of their head. Let's not lose the mental game. What about a coach? What's some of the things you did maybe from 18 to 21 that you're like, no, let's I'm overthinking it here. Are there any times you had to
Yeah,
step back or
I've been blessed and with some great assistant coaches. And so part of my development, I believe, from leading a program versus just coaching a sport, is being able to rely on the input and trusting their input. And so I've gotten better at that as I've gotten older. But how I grew as a coach was learning from mistakes, right? Not trying to repeat the same ones I had made, but also leaning on our coaches heavy for, hey, hold me accountable. I don't want you to say yes because it's my idea. I want you to blow holes in it if it's a terrible idea. Now, if you blow holes in it and I'm still convicted enough, I do it, well, that's on me, because ultimately our head's on the chopping block, right? So somebody's got to have 51% of the vote. It just happens to be the head coach, right? So I think I've gotten better at accepting input, and letting them voice their angle, without being closed-minded. I've
now, is
gotten
that
better
like
at that.
from coach to coach, or how much do you allow on that from player to coach? What's that dynamic look like? From year to year, has that changed too?
It has. It has. Early on, I didn't. I guess I allow more player input than I probably ever thought I would as a head coach. Early on, first year, their input was they got to set the senior class set the goals for the team. And we had coaches set a goal of how we want the team to, what we want the team to do. What do we stand for? How are we going to present ourselves? How are we going to act? How are we going to respect our opponent? Those types of things we set as a staff. We let the team set their goals, the result side of things. And so that was it. That was kind of like their input. We took it and then we laid out the plan. Now, hey, I've got guys I trust on the team. Hey, this is what I'm thinking practice plan wise. This is where I think I see we need it. I'll get it. It'll go to the coaches first. They'll have input on what they think we need to do. Then I'll send it to the players that I have a little more confidence in being mature about an answer, and say, hey, here's what I think we're working on today. What do you think? Got anything to add? Stuff like that, just to have more input.
These are the dynamics that I absolutely, as a fan, love. I love the psychology of baseball as a fan. I know it drives coaches mad sometimes, but as a fan, it's the beautiful part of the game. Are you a pregame speech guy, or are you just let's go to work?
I'm probably more of a pregame speech than postgame speech. One of my head coaches said, dude, keep your post-game speech to like 5 words or less, because whether they won or whether they lost, they're not going to listen to you. They're ready to go home. They're hungry. They probably got homework, and their girlfriend's probably waiting on them to get off the bus. Doesn't matter if you had the most prophetic speech, they're not going to hear it. So then I kind of took that to heart and said, well, maybe I'll try and influence the pregame speech a little more. So yeah, more of a pregame guy, but really it's just about our pregame speech is really more about, okay, this is our plan today,
X's and
right?
O's.
This is going to be our approach because of this guy on the hill, or whatever the situation. Maybe it's a defensive approach, an alignment because of who we have on the hill and what they have in their lineup. So a lot of that pregame stuff is more strategic during the game, or to have them in the right mindset going into the game.
Was there any difference in like 18, 19, and 21 as far as, you know, or did you say maybe I need to put these guys in a mindset, or did you say nope, we're going to stick to the plan, we're going to talk X's and O's? Anything different in that pregame for those 3 finals?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, first one, I was probably, I was as nervous as they were, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes leading up to a state finals game. And there's a lot of, it's not like you're playing at home, you get to roll out when you want to roll out and guys kind of go through their normal routine. You're on a schedule that's not your own.
Yeah, there's a
And
regimen there.
yeah, I mean, you're tucked off in the corner so nobody can see you. And it's, there's, you never know when the game's before you is going to end, or whatnot. So there's a lot of things going. So I was pretty much a nervous wreck in 18 because I'm a scheduled guy. So we start practice at X. We go to this drill after what, after so many minutes. And then, the last 40 minutes is kind of freelance, but the first 45 minutes to an hour is scripted. And so when I was a little OCD and not having control of that situation, it bothered me a little bit.
Before we talk about, go ahead. Sorry.
Right. No, I was just saying different going into 19, a little more relaxed. 21.
You can tell that in 21, you were an old pro at that.
Yeah. I mean, what was the worst thing can happen? They'd keep calling me Marv Levy. I don't know. My coaches called me Marv
for the young kids.
Yeah. Yeah. For you young people that don't understand. So, but we did a lot. Our biggest change from a coaching perspective, and I do want to touch on this because I think this is the part that, so in 19, we went in about 3.5 minutes. We went from a state championship to runner-up, and I own all of that because what I felt we didn't do, and this is what our coaching staff came up. We felt like they weren't prepared for that adversity. They were prepared for the victory. They were prepared for the high. They weren't prepared for the adversity that they faced, and that as a coach, it was what haunts me. It's not a throw. It's not anything. It's that I didn't have them prepared between the years to handle that mistake and move on. And so after 2019, we made an effort. One of my assistant coaches, who's also our middle school director at the ABCA, we sought out I'll say mindfulness training or mental coaches. And we went to a lot, and we talked to a lot of people about how do we go about implementing some type of regimen in our routine, daily routine that begins to prepare our kids for being able to get present, being able to wipe out what just happened, good or bad, but get right back into the moment and task at hand. And it's goofy, and that's okay. I don't know but so 10 minutes of every day is breathing, meditation, some type of exercise that basically allows them to slow their heart rate, get back to what matters in the moment, whether they're in the box or on the mound or in the field. We specifically try to train the mind. And that's about the only thing we do a whole lot different.
Well, that's
But
pure
that's part that
gold.
haunts me about 19. Because
That,
19, our guys were not ready. When that shock hit them, they were not prepared. They were numb. They couldn't tell you what they did for the next 3.5 minutes.
well, I'll tell you,
Um,
and I told you this offline, and I mean it. Watching that game, like I said, I could relive it, not as vividly as you. I know, but it's just one of those games that it was so special, and so dramatic. And then after the game finished, for those of you listening, this is really the main reason I wanted to have Coach Mattingly on, is you talked about pregame speeches, and we're going to talk about what you said, after different times as well. But what I saw in that 3 minute span from when the tide shifted abruptly to when the game was over, and your players are obviously to a level of heartbreak, level of distraught, whatever you want to call it, that was, it was obviously noticeable. I mean, the world just shook, and frustration, tears, and I saw you go because I'm looking down and I hit you right away. And regardless of what's going on in your head, because you got to deal with what's going on in your head too, and that's not easy. But you went from coach mode to dad mode in a flip of a switch, and you were there for him. I mean, even your presence on social media afterwards was, it was all about forward. Take us through that from when the game was over in 2019. Take us through, however much you want to zoom in, take us
mm,
through that moment from when Alexander Monroe's crowd goes nuts. And by the way, congratulations, Alexander Monroe. I'm
Totally.
not taking anything away from you, and
Nope.
you'll say the same. But take us
Totally.
that moment. What's going through your mind when Southridge players and fans just said, "What just happened?" And
Mm,
Alexander Monroe's going nuts. Two separate worlds going on there.
right.
What's going on in your mind, and tell us about some of the conversations that happened there on the to that point, to the bus, to the next few days.
Oh, yeah. I think, we talked a little bit offline. I think from my perspective, um, if I want to be able to convey to our players and to our young men that albeit this might be the most important thing that they're going to do right now, it isn't probably the most important thing they'll ever do in their life. Not that baseball, to me, baseball's been a lifetime. I mean, I've played it since I was 4. But in that moment, I was more concerned about their well-being than I was about a trophy. I mean, these kids had laid it all on the line. They'd done everything we'd asked, and it was an unfortunate event, right? But it wasn't the end of the world. They weren't going to be defined by whether they won a high school state championship or not. Because outside of you, I'm not sure if I said who won the 1962, baseball state championship game. You might be the only person or the players on that team that could name that. So it wasn't going to be it's not a defining moment of character and what their life is going to be measured by. And I think I went into that mode of like, okay, they're hurting, they're suffering, they need to know it's okay. They don't need me to be me, a butthole coach, mad because, oh crap, I didn't win a blue medal or whatever. I didn't need it. It wasn't about that. It was about a group of kids that needed to be loved and said it was okay to cry and to be upset and all those things. For me, that's what kicked in.
Well, and
You call it parent mode or whatever. It's just they didn't need a coach to at that point, they needed somebody's shoulder to cry on.
And I think, yeah, like you said, kids can be pretty resilient. You said you give a post game
Mhm.
speech and they'll forget about it 15 minutes later. But, that it's one of the reasons why I am a huge fan of high school baseball. Because number one, at the playing level, it's human, as what we're
Absolutely.
talking about right here, you know, uh, but number two, it's because coaches like you know that it's human, and it's about the kids, and you've experienced loss. You've
Mm.
you're you know, what does, as we get close to kind of wrapping up here, I want to kind of dive deep into that whole concept of, what loss means to you now, what loss means to you 10 years ago. And you've had some events in your life, you've of loss of a daughter that, as a parent of six myself, I can't fathom it.
Right.
But I think that's why people like you are in the place that you're in, is because I think nothing teaches loss better than baseball. So, you know, tell us about your perspective looking back. What does loss mean to you? How has it changed you? And what is it, how do you try to bring that into your team?
Yeah. And I think, we talked a little bit off air, before. I think loss has given me the loss of Lexi, right? So an unbelievable hole forever inside. But completely gives a different perspective of what matters the most, right? I mean, I don't ever want to downplay the fact that sports, especially baseball in our world, it's important. And there's so much we can learn from it, from a character standpoint. It builds. People say, well, it doesn't build it; it reveals it. You know what? Adversity, and this sport's full of it, chisels your character, and it separates the mentally tough and the ones who can keep going when it's hard from the ones who can't. That once their feelings go a different direction, then they move on to a different sport because they can't handle that. But that situation and that experience in our lives as a family, I think, provided us, and especially with me, as what matters in a priority perspective. And too often we put certain things in front of our family. Because we look at it as coaches, and that's my responsibility, is to win, and I've got to be. And so a lot of the people who suffer are the ones that we love the most. And so it helped me prioritize. That's what loss did. It helped me prioritize. And I think it gives me a perspective of empathy that I didn't have before. You ask what would have loss like that meant to me 10 years ago. I would have been an angry fool, right? I'd have been so mad that, that we were right there. And how could we, right? I mean, it's just, those things would have ate me up, because that would have been the most important thing, was winning. There's some rings sitting behind me that I've never even put on, but we all chase them, right? It's like, they're not important. I try to teach our guys is, failure isn't final. Rarely is it fatal. It's how we respond to the adversity and how we respond to a loss. How do we respond to an 0 for 3 the day before, because we got to turn around and play again? How do we respond to a bad call on the outer half of the plate, that might have been in the other batter's box, but you get rung up? How do you respond to those types of things, and try and put the game in perspective so that they can begin to understand that life's not fair. Bad things are going to happen to good people, and there's nothing we can do about it. And to use their judgment, to understand and discern where their priorities are. And it's hard to do when they're 16, 17, and 18. But if we can do it as adults, they're going to learn from us.
Well, and it's
They're
a
going
case study too. If you look at that 18, 19, and in 21, the whole team had that Ethan Bell composure. And
Oh, absolutely.
because they learned from that loss. I mean, is that something you identified as well? Is it?
Absolutely. That's when I mentioned earlier, there was nothing they weren't prepared to do to win. I mean, it wasn't, losing was never an option. 18, yeah, we were happy to be there. We thought we were going to win. We were talented. We ran. I mean, so was Boone Grove, right? I mean, they were talented. They won. In 19, it was like we were playing for a reason that really wasn't, really was I think it was misprioritized. I think our 19, not that we weren't great, because we were a great team. Alexandria Monroe was a great team. But I think we approached it incorrectly, as we were atoning for a loss, and really we should have just been preparing to battle, right, and let whatever happens happen. And when it went south, when all we were thinking about was atonement, we didn't know how to respond to that. Or we as our players didn't. And again, that's
Kind of all the chips
that's
in
on
one
me.
bag, kind of.
Yeah, that's on me. They didn't know how to respond to that. But going into 21, no doubt, you could look in their eyes. Silver Creek, amazing game. Well, go back
Yeah,
to
the
our
teams you
section.
had to get through there in
Washington
21.
1-0. Yeah, Washington 1-0. Reed throws a great, he's an amazing game. He's in Indiana State right now. And it was just mono. It just didn't matter. I mean, those guys were going to battle as hard and long as it was required of them to win.
Well, and we could dive into that too. You're talking about, the change in mindset of adversity and everything like that. 2021, you're unranked, and you have to go through Silver Creek, which was just a juggernaut that year. Then you had to go through a guy named Andrew Dukanich, and finally you had to enter with 29-2 Hanover Central with Mathice on the bump.
Right.
So
Yep.
it wasn't a
It was
done
probably
deal.
our toughest road,
Yeah.
to be honest. It was probably our toughest road.
What are you thinking about that now, having gone through three? When you talk about, your change in perspective and priorities, you're talking to a high school coach, a young high school coach that's taking his first trip to the Vic. What's he need to focus on?
Breathe. First and foremost, breathe. Your heart rate's going to be about 140. No, it's, and this is where I go back to Coach Gobert. So Coach Gobert, Coach Howard, obviously been there several times. They were really gracious and forthcoming with, hey, these are some things I would avoid. These are some mistakes we made taking teams up, and different types of things like that. Just really kind of providing some guidance there. So from my perspective is, don't get your team so hyped up. It's okay to let them stay loose until you want them to be loose, because you don't want to play tight. But don't be, for me as a control freak, I was a little, all right, don't do this, don't do that. I felt like I was, at 18, I felt like I was a father of a 4-year-old where, I was worried about, them breaking something at Victory Field kind of thing. I'm like, dude, they got more money than we do anyway. If it breaks, they'll fix it. So just kind of relax on that end. Player passes and all that other stuff, man, push that off on an assistant coach or a booster president. Don't try and do it all yourself because, you think you have to. So those are the things that, and just, take it all in. Stop in the third base box every inning and just take it in. There's plenty of time because there's TV time.
Have a 12-year-old kid moment.
Yeah, just look at it and say, you know what? This is friggin' cool, because there's 400 other schools that would love to be here, and now there's only 8 of us left, right? I mean, there's a time to say, you know what? Win or lose, this is a really big deal. And we're fortunate and grateful to be a part of it. And I think that's where we get so lost on the winning side of things that we don't appreciate until too long after just how special it is to get there. I mean, think how hard it is to win a sectional. And then you add the extra layers on there, and it's like, okay, how hard is it to get to Victory Field? Just appreciate the fact that your guys were prepared enough and they played well enough to get there. And you lay your heart out there trying to win. But if you don't, yeah, it sucks. Excuse my French. It hurts. But you know what? It's pretty special to get there. And so I think that's what I would tell young coaches. Getting there is just, or any coach, regardless. I mean, I was 50, almost 50 when I got there, but that wouldn't be necessarily young, but not Antone's age, right? So we're still pretty good friends. Yeah, he wasn't even, I don't think, he was barely old enough to drink, and he was winning a state title. But it's one of those things. It's like, embrace it, enjoy it, but don't get too caught up in the stress of winning and losing. Because at the end of the day, this is, you asked me a while ago, my philosophy is like something, I was like, I don't get stressed over winning and losing. I get stressed on, are we better today than we were yesterday? I stress that, if we're making the same mistakes, 2 weeks into the season as we made in our first scrimmage, right? Because wins and losses they're not in our control. And so we can play. I remember 2018, the best game we played all year, we lost at home. We lost 3-2. We hit the ball as hard as we've ever hit it all over our ballpark. And it found a Rawlings or a Wilson every time it left our bat. We got beat 3-2 by Northeast Du Bois, and it was as good as we could play. And I'm like, we did everything we could. They just beat us. And so some of that comes with age and maturity, and some of it comes with just understanding priority of, the wins and losses are just a measurement, and it's really not the prize.
Well, I'll tell you, I know one coach that's listening to this to this episode, because I ironically talked to him earlier today. We were chatting. It's Coach Coulter up at South Central Union Mills. Of course, he's got with Farrell. He's got a dude on the team this year, and the last 2 years he's lost to number one Lafayette Central Catholic 1-0, and then Washington Township the year before that, when they went to the state finals, they lost to them 1-0. So I said, you want to make sure you listen into this show. He's like, oh yeah. He goes, I got a lot of respect for Coach Mattingly.
I appreciate it.
As we wrap things up, and that's going to be hard for me to do on this side of the show, because I told you I could talk about this all night, but a couple just tie-in questions that I wanted to get out there. It again goes back to that psychology, but kind of going off of what you were saying, that balance between confidence and humility. Did you say anything? Your mound visits between 2018, 19, and 21 there in the finals, did you approach them differently?
Not really. I'm not. When I go to if I go to a mound visit, I'm probably not going to say a whole lot. Probably just taking them out. That's what our pitching coach. Coach Lamar's job is to go out and talk to them about certain things. And if I go out there early, that means I'm really pissed at how they're acting on the mound, right? They're either not, their body language stinks, something like that. If I go out there late, it's usually take them out. I don't usually provide a whole lot, but so my mound visits didn't change a whole lot, but our approach, I think we became more in tune with our approach. As we progressed, I think our staff, Coach McHugh, Coach Craig, Coach Barnett, Coach Markham, Coach Merkel. I mean, we got our football coach gives me a hard time because I got more coaches than he does. Most of them are unpaid, but we did a better job of scouting. We did a better job of understanding what our competition strengths and weaknesses were. Not that we were going to control it, but we wanted to be aware. And so I think we did a better job as a staff getting our guys prepared for what was ahead of them, especially going into, that in 2021, we had the kind of players that understood that we could set an approach, and they were they would execute approaches. And so that's a different level of player that we normally don't get at the high school level, right? I mean, those guys, we could say, okay, here's our plan. Here's how we're going to approach these at bats early in the game, and they could execute those. You talked about DeConnich. Our guys probably had 20 or 30 at bats off of him before the game ever started. Our coaches did an amazing job of video and going to YouTube and picking up videos. I mean, all these guys. I mean, it's out there. It's free. It's not. I mean, we're watching as part of our game plan. As our practice plans. We're watching delivery. We're watching release points. We're watching their charting. They're charting counts. What's he throwing? What count? They
have
were
the $20,000 pitching machine like Andrean had last year.
Oh no, Coach Fisker and I talked about that. No, we didn't have that, but we did a lot of good things. We used virtual reality on certain things. They were just ready, and it was their time, and they could execute. And it was a joy to be around. There's a picture. I don't know if you can see it. It's up there. It's hard to see. Basically, it's the last inning of the game. That's my best friend, Coach McHugh. He and I played college baseball together. I'm sweeping sunflower seeds up off the floor of the dugout as the game's ending.
That is a perfect way of that says so much.
Somebody said, what are you doing? I'm like, there's nothing I can do. It's under control. They know what to do. They're going to get it done. There's no sense in me standing on the rail fretting about it. Coach Gobert and them are coming in after us. The dugout's going to be clean, right? It's going to be clean, win or lose. We're not having sunflower seeds all over the floor for them to have to mess with. And so when the game ended, I just set the broom down and let everybody run out of the dugout, gave my daughter a hug. She was my manager, and I just sat there and watched them just celebrate, just have their moment, the moment that they had been preparing themselves for and striving for was what happened there behind the mound.
I think talking about sweeping up sunflower seeds and as the head coach on a state finals says more than anything I could say about about the respect I have for these 4 seasons and how you managed them. But as kind of, if it's even possible to summarize them, how much of baseball, high school baseball, is getting a kid out of their head and just getting them to play baseball? I mean, how much do you?
100%. 100%. These kids, we get kids now that are so well trained. They play so much baseball that they have been coached to the point where they think before, they think about everything. They start at 5 years old and they're get your elbow up, get your elbow down, put your arm up here, don't throw sidearm, you're going to hurt your arm. We have done a really good job of coaching athleticism out of players and out of athletes. And so these guys play so much, they're evaluated so much, they're on Rapsodos and TrackMans and radar guns from the time they're 8, I think, all the way up. And so they are so fixated on everything they have to be doing something wrong when they don't succeed. Think about that. Every swing, when they're at their coach, if they're a swing coach or if they're pitching coach, every time they take a swing, there's a comment. It's good or it's bad. It's do this, do that. And so
they create feedback.
Yeah. And they can't live without it. We've created it. And so anytime, if they get a 2-0 fastball and they just miss it, in their head, they're changing something. Their swing was bad. They did something wrong. No, you just didn't. Your timing stunk, right? Your timing wasn't there. It wasn't your swing. And so now they immediately start changing things. So getting kids out of their own head and just let them play. That's why I love where I coach. That's why I love multi-sport athletes, because I can say, you know what, go play like your hair's on fire on the football field. We always say, quit stinking thinking, because when you start thinking, things start going wrong. Just be an athlete, react, and something's not wrong every time you don't get a hit. Sometimes the defense makes a great play or the pitcher makes a great pitch, right? Sometimes the sport tells you no, right? And how many of these kids here know?
Well, I know you're not making it easy on me to wrap things up. I could dive into that topic right there for another hour. If you think about, we've been talking about 2018 through 2021 perspectives you've taken for that. What's the perspective going forward? What are we looking at 2023?
Yeah, 20. I'll go back and I'll give our guys, our 22 guys, who that's a tough act to follow, right? 22 following that group that just graduated, and everybody expected us to be terrible, and maybe in their eyes we were, but man, I don't know that I've been as proud of a team as how we grew last year and how we continue to get better. We beat a really good Gibson Southern team. I think that was ranked 3rd or 4th in 3A in the first round of sectional. And that's a team that had just beat us, rolled us at home, a couple weeks before. So our guys, and when we talk about success, if we measured our 22 team against our 21 team and we measured success the same way, it would be completely unfair, right? It just completely unfair. We started a freshman at shortstop, in the sectional. Is he the same freshman that Colson was at? No, I mean, just not the same, right? He's going to be a great player. And so they got so much better, and I was so proud of their progression because they stuck to the plan, they stuck to the process, and their job was to get better every day. And so they did, and they were playing their best baseball at the end, and that's what we asked them.
And isn't that the
23,
goal? No matter where you
it
start, your
is.
goal is
It
just to
doesn't
get
matter.
better at
I
the end,
mean,
right?
you got to play your best ball at the end. Now, it doesn't mean but that's the goal of every coach, I think, is if you play your best ball at the beginning of April, it's probably going to be you're going to be a long summer for you, right? You're going to have a long, easy summer. If you're playing your best ball at the end of May, you got a good chance to keep playing. And so 2023, I'm excited. We've got some guys I think that are that's done the right things. They've done the right things with their bodies. They've done the right things training. They're continuing to do the right things between their ears. And I'm really excited about what 23 looks like with this group. We had our first limited contact period practice last night. We went for about an hour and a half of just get after it. And we had 11 guys there, which is kind of unheard of for us. And they got, so yeah, I'm excited.
What's the?
Really
I don't have
excited.
the sectionals in front of me. What's your sectional look like this year?
It's kind of back to our old 3A sectional. So it's us and Jasper, Washington, Pike, I think Lincoln.
Is Gibson Southern still? They're down in 2A, though, aren't they?
Gibson Southern is 3A, but they're going to, they split with Jasper coming back down. It kind of reshuffled the 3A sectionals because Boonville, so Heritage Hills and Boonville and Memorial and Harrison and I think Harrison, those guys stay down there. And then I think we're moving back up instead of going to Princeton. Well, shouldn't say instead of going to Princeton. They don't know who's going to host it yet. Right. With Jasper coming back down, obviously,
Terry comes into the equation.
Comes into play.
Right.
And so Terry obviously is going to want it. We're obviously going to want it. Princeton will want it. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. But again, it's going to be tough. It's just like it doesn't matter if it's 1A, you got to play Tecumseh or North, 2A, you got to go through Forest Park or South Spencer. 3A doesn't get any easier. 4A doesn't get any easier. Yeah, I mean, it's just good baseball down here. Good competitive baseball and whatever it looks like, we don't get to decide who we play. We just decide how we play.
You just want to make it look better at Southridge at the end than it was at the beginning. And I'll tell you, from a fan perspective, I just got to say that I'm looking forward to this season. I mean, you got some dudes down there in southern Indiana, southwest Indiana, the Tilly and the crew, and
the Tilly kid.
Yeah, there's a few.
We get him right out of the gate. That'll be fun.
That's going to be exciting to watch as a fan. Coach Mattingly is who we're talking to, and Coach, am I missing anything? Perspective over the last 5 years. What did we miss?
I think perspective is just, there's high school sports are an amazing opportunity for these young men and young women. And I hope as adults that are charged with moving the game forward but more importantly, helping these young men and women become, husbands and fathers and things like, and part of our society. I think we can't not take that seriously, and we can't not be intentional about how we treat them as humans and how we prepare them as human beings versus just athletes. That's that would be my thing to anybody listening that either coaching or aspiring to coach. It's like, what, it's the person first, then it's the athlete. And if you love the person first, you're going to get the best out of the athlete, and that's that way we all win.
Well, I say it every week. Indiana high school baseball is in good hands. It's because of coaches like Gene Mattingly. Coach, I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Dan.